All right, massive changes coming to college football. Is it the worst moves yet for the fan itself? I think it is. We get into all of it next. Locked On Gamecock starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. I'm your host, Chris Marler, and we have a good second episode for you today on Thursday, January 30th. So I appreciate all of you who are listening and make your first listen each and every day, Locked On Gamecocks. Remember, we are a free and available podcast as well, where you find all your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we appreciate everyone that makes Locked On Gamecocks their first listen. Shout out to our everydayers. Now, that being said, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at the Game Time app. You guys have heard me talk about them before. They do a great job. Make sure you go get the app, download the app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, all capital letters, for $20 off your first purchase. What time is it? It's game time. It's game time for the show to start. We've got an interesting one. I'm excited to talk about it, and I'm probably going to go off on the rails and get pretty fired up over something that I'm pretty passionate about here. And what I'm not passionate about is private equity. And that's kind of what today's episode's about. Before you turn the dial, hear me out. Let me explain what I'm talking about and how it impacts South Carolina specifically. Today it was announced that the Big Ten is going to explore preliminary bids from private equity groups and firms this week after retaining an investment bank, Evercore. The Big Ten commissioner, Tony Petitti, previously expressed skepticism about private equity's upside. However, the Big Ten Conference is going to start taking preliminary bids and talking to private equity firms about investing in their conference. Now, this is a confusing subject, but it's very dangerous to the sport as a whole, and it is for a number of reasons. And I think the thing that pisses me off the most already, without even understanding fully what could happen, because I don't want this to be a sky is falling, doomsday, we're just fearing change, all that kind of stuff. But the addition of private equity having any sort of involvement in college football, it feels like it's the most recent in a very long line of changes that is being done strictly for money, strictly for greed, strictly to make the pockets fatter for people that are like the heads of the sport, without ever considering anything about the fans that are consuming the product. And what is the biggest issue with this is here. You talk about, this is from Sportico, and it says there, again, I'm going to read this so we make sure I don't miss it. But the Big Ten Conference taking preliminary bids from private equity firms, blah, 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 despite past comments saying they wouldn't. The reason why that is concerning for the SEC and South Carolina specifically is this. Whenever something like the Big Ten usually decides to do something, or at least a Power Four conference, a big conference like that, usually it's the first domino to fall in several things to happen next, whether it's NIL, whether it's transfer portal, whether it's conference realignment. We saw that happen since the start of the 2010s, and how much has changed over the landscape of college football. Some of it good, some of it bad. But almost every time something like this with a powerful entity in college football like the Big Ten, almost every time a big name like that and a big brand and a big conference starts something, it's usually not the end of it. When they start it, it's usually not where it's finished, okay? And the only thing I can think of that has not really taken place similar to that situation where there isn't a domino effect is like in the COVID year when you saw the alliance, that weird thing that was formed by the Pac-12, Big Ten, and ACC. Now, that's the COVID year. There's a lot of other weird factors that go into that. This is not that. But what we have seen in terms of change over the landscape of college football over the last year specifically, the biggest thing that's involved in the common denominator and everything is money. And it's you can't put it back in the box, right? Like, the sport has changed and evolved so much, and so many things have happened from it. You can't just put it back in the box now that it's opened. And it's a scary thought, because the private equity part of this that you've seen in actual professional sports, I'm going to read you this and say it's a great article from firecapitalmanagement.com. And it says, kind of the pros and cons of what happens. And I want you to listen closely what the very last thing is that is said, because it's the most important part, and it's added in there like a throwaway line and just an extra thing they're just tossing in there, almost like a college assignment where you're just adding in words because you have to hit a word count. The private equity involvement in sports brings both opportunities and challenges. While capital injection, professional management, and growth opportunities can significantly benefit sports franchises, the potential downsides of a focus on short-term returns, profit-driven decisions, increased debt financing, and fan discontent cannot be ignored. Fan discontent. It is crucial to balance financial goals. It is crucial to balance financial goals with the long-term health and success of sports teams, ensuring that the pursuit of financial goals does not overshadow the ultimate goal of being competitive and, ready for it, maintaining fan loyalty. If you are going to let private firms, companies, all of the above, start investing into your product, into your brand, like the Big Ten, expecting returns back, my immediate question is not whether it's good business, whether it's, can they do this? Is it going to happen or whatever? My immediate question is, if we can't trust what's happening from the governing people in this sport now, how the hell are we going to do it when you get outside companies and resources being brought in whose only bottom line and only interest in the sport is to make profit for their company? How are we going to trust the powers that be are making the right decisions then? And guys, that is a terrifying potential reality that you would have to face as a college football fan. Conference realignment was one thing. The arms race that's happened with facilities and NIL collectives and all these other things, like that's another thing. The TV deals and the weird behind the scenes assumptions and accusations and all that kind of stuff from the TV deals and their alignment and association and partnerships with specific conferences. That's a whole other thing to deal with. You think about all the stuff that you've heard me make some comments loosely before about, like, it is weird that Texas came into the SEC and got gifted the easiest schedule out of everyone. You're in charge of making the schedule. How'd that happen? Like, that feels weird. It's weird that you know, that happened, and it feels like it's happening in multiple sports. It's, it's weird that, like, when you talk about, like, whenever I hear Fox Sports talk about, Big Ten versus SEC, there's an angle to it because their audience is primarily Big Ten. There's a reason why people always assume that Kirk Herbstreit and ESPN is always in the pockets and closely aligned for the interests of their own company and employer with the SEC. If we're not able to trust what's happening now, how are we going to do it when private equity somehow gets involved with what used to be amateur college athletics? And again, the only point of interest that they would have is to turn a profit in the short term. What's the best way to turn a profit in the short term for if you're in the Big Ten? I tell you what, it probably is having a team like Ohio State front and center as much as possible, Oregon front and center, restoring Southern Cal, Michigan, Penn State, those blue blood programs that we've always kind of thought kind of get the benefit of the doubt unfairly. I mean, hell, Michigan before last year lived off of half a national championship and was considered a blue blood program for, that the last time they had won something was 1948. They won a half a national championship in 97, and we saw them shove down our throats every time they could. People outside the SEC have this feeling that the SEC gets so much unfair benefit of the doubt and all this other stuff. If there's already that level of distrust, and not just distrust from the fans, distrust from people that are paid at a high level to talk about this stuff and report on it and tell you with their own eyes what they think they're seeing. Big J journalists, not me. like big J journalists. How are we supposed to trust that any of this, I want to say, is in the best interest of the fan or the sport, but that's gone so far out the window so long ago that I don't even know what the end of that sentence would be. How do you trust any of this point blank period? And the answer is you can't. So this happening from the Big Ten is a big deal because of everything I just told you about, and also because anytime the Big Ten has done something recently, the SEC especially has tried to keep up with the Joneses immediately. We saw the Big 12 do something similar when there was like, we're not going to be the last ones without a chair. This weird game of, what's it called? Producer Allie, text me what's the game? Musical chairs. There you go. In this weird game of musical chairs, it would have been a much better analogy if I didn't stumble through it. But they went out and got teams from the Pac-12. They got Colorado back. They got Arizona and Arizona State, and a couple of these teams from the ACC and AAC and whatever, because they want to maintain their Power 4 status. But you've also seen the moment you saw Oregon was going to go out and there was rumors that they were going to go out and get Oregon for the Big Ten and Southern Cal and UCLA and Washington, and so they had a national brand and expanding their footprint. And you have markets from all over the country. Pepper's over here, very upset there's no water in the bowl because she just drank it all. But they're trying to expand into all these different markets across the country. Shortly after that, at Media Days in 2021, I remember it very vividly, you saw Greg Sankey say, by the way, pretty big announcement, Texas and Oklahoma are coming up with us. If private equity gets involved here, and there's so much, even more money to be made for the Big Ten, it makes so much sense that the SEC would follow. And that may put more money into the pocket of the teams in this conference. But what it's also going to do is create even more distrust and distaste from SEC fans. Not to be a Debbie Downer, but this is the kind of stuff you hear when people say, it feels like the sport's broken a little bit. If this goes through, it's hard to argue that. Anyway, that is all for the first very somber and down and negative opening parts of the show. And I apologize. I don't want you guys to feel that way at all. Before we go to break, actually, you know what? Let's go to break. We'll go to break, and we'll get this dirty taste out of our mouth, and we'll be right back with more Locked On Gamecocks. All right, we are back, and I appreciate you guys listening in. And let me know your thoughts on everything that we just said, and on whether you agree, disagree, something in between. I would love to hear your thoughts. And I hate to be negative about the sport I love because it's my favorite thing in the world and has been since I was 4 years old. But I really hope that they go into this very hesitant and they think through the long-term effects of what it could be. All right. Before we continue with the rest of today's show, I do want to give a quick shout out again to our friends at the Game Time app. And guys, listen, we got spring baseball coming up. We've got March Madness coming up. Obviously, the Super Bowl. I have not looked at Super Bowl tickets on Game Time, so I don't know what those tickets will be going for. But if you are trying to get tickets to anything, whether it be sports, concerts, comedy, theater, anything under the sun, I'm telling you again, the Game Time app is the place to be. All you need to do is go download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, all capital letters, for $20 off your first purchase. It's the best ticketing agency in the game, from the best customer service to other deals. Right after Game Time, the tickets get cheaper as you get closer to the actual event, and they also have great features like all-in pricing up front, so you can see exactly what the total is going to be before you ever get to the final page and see a bunch of fees added on and blah, blah, blah. You can also see tickets from your seat, a panoramic view from your seats inside the stadium arena before you ever step foot through the turnstiles. So all of those things are what make Game Time app the best ticketing market or ticketing agency in the world. Make sure you are going to check out Game Time app for all your ticketing needs. Remember, download the app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, all capital letters, for $20 off your first purchase. What time is it? It's Game Time. All right, let's get into the final part of the show. And we recorded 2 episodes today. And what we talked about earlier today was a pretty interesting topic because it was recruiting and the finalization of evaluations from 247 Sports and On3. We'll get more into the On3 stuff later on. I don't want to do a back-to-back show since we just did the one about 247. But there was something interesting that came up because about an hour after we recorded is when On3 made their final top 300 rankings, final team rankings, player rankings, all that kind of stuff. Like I said, 247 did theirs yesterday. The point of this morning's episode, make sure you guys go check it out, was pulling away from Clemson and kind of turning this corner, because on the 247 side especially, which is one of the most trusted sites and platforms for recruiting in the industry, you end up with a top 20 class, and then you look behind you and you see Clemson at 27. And that is not that might be the lowest I've seen Clemson in the last 15 years. Only 15 signed recruits. On 247, they only had 6 blue chip players that are 4-star or higher. South Carolina doubled that. So the other part of it that I saw from On3 that was most interesting to me was this. Now, on On3, I think on 247 Sports, they finished up at 19, right? On On3, they finished at 17 with the 10th best class in the SEC. Now, one of the things I was saying earlier today was, like, don't panic or think like, oh man, like, well, sure, the top 20 class is great, but you're still 11th in the SEC. On On3, you finish with a top 10 class. But what's interesting about it more than anything is where the class ranks in comparison to the other conferences and teams around you. So I want to put this in perspective a little bit, okay? So for South Carolina, they finished with the they finished with the 17th ranked class in the country, right? That would be the 10th ranked class in the SEC. If they were in the Big Ten, their class would be the 6th best class in the Big Ten, full of 18 teams. In the ACC, it would have been the 2nd best class, right behind Miami. And in the Big 12, it would be the best class by far, by over 10 spots, of any team in the Big 12. That made it sound like it's not a big deal, like whatever. I personally think it is, for a number of reasons, because it's showing you where you stand with the rest of the country. We get so bogged down in this, like, not echo chamber, but like just around us. We talk about the SEC all the time. It's what I'm paid to do most. But especially when you live in state with with an in-state rival, arch rival that is in another conference, I think it's important to look at where you stand, like, in terms of keeping up the Joneses from other conferences. Okay, this is the 10th best class in the SEC. It would be the best class in the Big 12, and it would be the 2nd best class in the ACC. What that tells me is a number of things. One, it tells me Shane Beamer has done an incredible job of amassing talent and recruiting, even if he's not up there with the Alabama, the LSU, and all that kind of stuff. Give it time. But 3 straight top 20 classes, and the fact that this is where the 10th best SEC class would rank in terms of other Power 4 teams. The other part of it is it tells me that you can play with anyone in the country. The talent you have is superior to 2 other conferences almost as a whole combined, which leads me to believe that it's just another reason why auto bids as well are about to be a thing of the past. Like, auto bids, when they redo this thing for the college football playoff, are going to be a thing of the past. When you think about it this year, there was no reason that Clemson got in over South Carolina just because they beat a bad SMU team that had 0 wins over ranked opponents all season, got boat raced in the playoff when they played. But we saw a prisoner of the moment, what have you done for me lately situation. The ACC championship was the last game of the day all by itself. It goes down to the wire, and it's like, how do you not put both these teams in? And Clemson just won and got an automatic bid. That's going to be a thing of the past. I don't know how they're going to fix all the little moving pieces of it and figure out how, like, if you win the conference, like, how do you get kept out? But I will tell you right now that auto bids are about to be a thing of the past, and this is just yet another reason why. The other thing I want to focus on before we go, it's 2 positive things. A name that I have done a poor job, not pronouncing, because I can pronounce it very well, but a name that I've done a poor job of talking enough about with this class. We've been so excited, me more than anyone, about the receivers that are coming in, right? But you've heard me also talk all offseason about, like, the positions of need and who can make an instant impact. I want to throw this name out here, Donovan Darden. He was one of the biggest risers in the final 300 rankings of any player in the country. I'm just going to read you the scout's take from On3. This is their words, not mine. Donovan Darden, edge rusher, South Carolina. Finished. He was ranked 122nd in the rankings before these. In the final rankings, he jumped up 70 spots to number 52 overall. In terms of physical and athletic traits, there may not be a more well-rounded specimen coming off the edge in this cycle than Donovan Darden. 6'4", 220 pounds. Keep in mind, the Gamecock signing actually perked our ears up during his junior track and field season by jumping nearly 22 feet in the long jump, and then throwing over 45 feet in the shot put. 6'4", 220. As a senior, he put up ridiculous production numbers. He had 24 tackles for loss, 11 sacks, 29 hurries. The twitch, the bend, the closing speed all jump off the tape emphatically as he buries ball carriers over and over again on his senior tape. As he physically develops and gets stronger, he will only become a more complete player off the edge. I don't know if Donovan Darden is going to be physically ready to step in right away. Dylan Stewart, coming out of high school, was a little bit bigger than 6'4", 220. I believe he was around 240. And then you talked to him in the summer. I think he was 245 when he was coming out of high school. And then after summer workouts, he got to like 269 because they posted that picture of him. And I'll look it up just to be on the safe side. So I don't know how much weight you're going to have to put on him immediately for him to be ready to go. Yeah, Dylan Stewart was 6'5", 250. Okay, but so I don't know if he's ready to compete right away. He could be, if you put enough muscle on this kid, which you could theoretically and realistically put 20 to 30 pounds on, and still not lose a ton of like mobility and bend and athleticism at his size and that age. If he's at 6'4", 250, he's probably a little bit more physically ready to play at the next level in year one. And if he does that, now you have another piece off the edge where you look at last year, part of the success that made Kyle Kennard so damn good and put up so many good numbers was he had someone else off the other side and off the other edge, like Dylan Stewart. So you cannot just double team Kennard the entire game or at all. I'm not saying this kid's necessarily going to be that, but I will tell you what is most, I think, intriguing about him is last year, the second highest ranked recruit on this for this team, which is Isaiah Thompson. Left tackle, came in, started day one, been a day one starter, hasn't taken a backseat or moved down the depth chart at all. You looked at him as a recruit and where he ranked. He ranked around, he was 37 in the country on 247. He was 36 nationally, so a little bit higher. But he was around 61, 64 on some of the other recruiting services. He was only a 5-star in one service. This Donovan Darden ranked a little bit lower, but not by much. And if it's two different positions, but it's a position that you could make an impact in early, or at the very least, he could be ready to come in after Jaden Brown's gone, or after, like if the kid from Missouri comes in and is productive, it's just added depth at the very least. Or next year, going into his draft eligible season, Dylan Stewart now has somebody else with a year of experience under their belt, a year in college, probably going to have some playing time, and a year in the weight room, a year and a half in the weight room. We might have the same production that we just saw in 2024 with Kennard and Stewart, with Darden and Stewart. It would be huge. That's a massive, massive deal. So I just thought that was really cool. That is all for today's show. I know we went down some rabbit holes. I appreciate you guys listening each and every day. And I hope all of you have a great rest of your evening. We'll be back tomorrow with the last episode of the month before we get into the weekend. Maybe we'll preview a little of the basketball weekend, as well as some other stuff too. So have a great night. We'll see you all next time. Go Cox.